All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And in this video, we're going to talk about what Terence Crawford's trainer Beaumac has to say about Errol Spence Jr. and also hopefully that fight will be announced soon. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. We are in the welterweight division again for this video. Brian McIntyre, the trainer of Terence Bud Crawford, had something pretty interesting, wild, and I don't know, man, maybe it's true to say about Errol Spence Jr. and his prospects in the fight against Terence Crawford. But before I get into that, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos, which we do on a daily basis. We have live streams on a daily basis, so there's always a good somebody here for you to talk boxing with and chop it up, argue with, all that good stuff. If you're a longtime subscriber, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for your support. All right, so let's jump into this. Brian McIntyre, who is the trainer of Terence Crawford, was asked about Errol Spence Jr. and said something I thought was very, very interesting. I won't say wildly interesting, but it was really interesting, especially because I was listening to some boxing conversations about what Derrick James had been saying about Errol Spence, about Terence Crawford, right? And it was almost like the comments were like the polar opposite of each other, and coming from a perspective of a fighter, coming from opposite perspectives, right? So what did he say? Brian McIntyre talked about Errol Spence Jr. and said that he did not believe that Errol Spence Jr. had made any improvement since he was in the amateurs. That he has been watching Errol Spence Jr. for many years and that nothing has changed. He fights the exact same way that he did when he turned professional, and there hasn't been any improvement in him whatsoever. And I thought to myself, wow, man, what is the likelihood of that being true? That somebody has fought 28 professional fights, has not learned anything, has not done anything different than he did before, even though I know I have seen him fight in multiple styles, not necessarily for good reason, but fought in multiple styles against multiple fighters. However, take him at his word, I would say, man, that's pretty interesting, because if he is literally the same fighter that he was in the amateurs, wouldn't that mean, or do you think that means that he would have been able to win a world championship the first or second fight in that? So the likelihood of there not being any improvement is very, very small. However, it does illustrate the fact that Beaumac and these guys think that Errol Spence Jr. is very, very basic and very predictable, that he does the same thing every single fight, that nothing changes up, and therefore, he is vulnerable to Bud because of that. Because one of Terence Crawford's absolute best attributes are his instincts, right? And being able to, and that's, based on what, best description of that was given, I do believe, by Teddy Atlas, talking about Terence Crawford, just said the man has a talent of figuring it out, having an instinct in the ring and making different adjustments and figuring out how to beat the guy in the ring. And if Errol Spence Jr. is going to be highly, highly predictable, then that feeds into Terence Crawford and his ability to make adjustments and adapt and be creative in the ring, right? Now, the reason why I say that is almost the opposite, the opposite of the viewpoint of Derrick James, who's the trainer of Errol Spence Jr., was that Derrick James said that he believed Terence Crawford, or at least he alluded to this, that Terence Crawford over relies on his athleticism, and he doesn't rely as much on the basic skills of boxing and getting it done in a very, very, very precise and accurate way. right? So he believed that, the longer you get away with that, the harder it's going to be. Like, he's like, before, when you're athletic, you're running around and you're knocking out, you're too quick, your reflexes are too quick for everybody. But then you get to a certain point and it's like, look, you start getting knocked out just like everybody else. Like, the key example of that is Roy Jones Jr., where Roy Jones Jr. was, without a doubt, one of the best fighters in the last 50 years, man, for sure. At his peak was one of the best fighters in the last 50 years. If not, man, some people could argue that he was at his peak the best fighter in the last 40 years for sure, since Ali retired. Many people think that he's best fighter to fight in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, 2010 to 2000s would have beat all those guys. And what happened with Roy Jones Jr., right? Roy Jones Jr. went up to heavyweight. He came back down once he put on extra muscle, right? And lost a little bit of his reflexes. He runs into a southpaw in Antonio Tarver, and he loses to Antonio Tarver. And after that, he loses to Glennoff Johnson. And there you go. Because although he's still a very skilled fighter and a good fighter, his reflexes are gone. And when the reflexes are gone, boom, that chin is right there, and you're able to be knocked out. So it seems like when you look at what Beaumac is saying, Beaumac is saying this guy has made no improvement and is basic and predictable. And Terence and on the other side, Derrick James is saying, look, man, this guy isn't basic enough and relies way too much on the icing, on the frilly type of things, like how quick you are, how fast you are, how much speed you have, and relying on those natural gifts to overcome people. But what happens when you run into somebody that is as athletic as you, but still very, very compact and very fundamentally sound? And I think also that there is like consider in any sport, when you look at that, when people are talking about how skilled somebody is, a lot of times, man, people mix skill and they mix talent, right? Because you have a lot, like take basketball, for example, you have a lot of very, very skilled basketball players that do not have the quickness or the speed that, say, somebody like a Stephen Curry does, or somebody like Allen Iverson does, or somebody like Isaiah Thomas, the old Isaiah Thomas, right? When somebody like Allen Iverson, who just really does rely upon blowing by you and jumping over you, right, being too quick for you, being too fast for you, when he loses that, then hey, he becomes susceptible to a lot of things. Where when you have guys like a Dwayne Wade, who relied on that early in his career, he gets older, but he can still play for a long time because he has those basic fundamentals down, right? That Michael Jordan the same way, basic fundamentals down that allow your career to go longer over long haul. And I think the question will be with Errol and Terence is, where do the two of those meet? Because you have clearly a super gifted athlete. And I'm telling you, a lot of the stuff, at least that is my belief, a lot of the stuff associated with Bud's IQ directly related to his ability to capitalize on things, where other people may see the same thing, but they don't have the ability, they don't have the quickness, they don't have the reflexes in order to take advantage of that, right? Where Bud does. So we'll see at 35 years old against a guy that doesn't give you a lot of holes, how that pans out and which one of these two corners are right about their assessments. But any way it goes, I do want people to know that, hey, man, and this ain't no shot at anybody, but this is just a guy I really like, man. Got a great channel, Boxing Gems, great channel. Look, man, both of these cats are talking foul about both camps, and look like they are, the trainers are talking foul about each other's fighters and downplaying these guys' talent, and it's on both sides of the spectrum. But anyway, it is what it is. That's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section, and with that, I'm out. Deuces.